to preparing for it. So I thought I'd be the warm-up act, you know, kind of the warm-up.
Opening act.
So, by the way, there's been so much happening, and everybody in this room has been involved to some extent, and you really ought to chat with them, find time and say, what did you guys do yesterday, the afternoon, morning, what was it you did on Saturday? And you'll find some really interesting things. This week we continue more of the programs, but I heard that the Department of Labor's the Crazy Rich Asians is all sold out.
Library Congress.
Oh yeah, excuse me, Library of Congress. Department of Labor with Sue's presentation, it's still open. So I want to start with a couple of things first. The last few days, the last few sessions, we have talked about going back to family villages, the roots. And one of the things that we always find when we go back is most touching and warming for us, is finding the village, finding the ancestral tomb or the ancestral graveyard, and that links us to that larger lineage to our ancestors. And if you were at the session yesterday at Smithsonian, one of the questions that were asked is, what do we mean when we say ancestors and descendants? Think about how important that is in our central understanding of ourselves and how we identify with ourselves. So what I want to do is speak that, and we also had Carol's right there, and she was also continuing discussion in the second session about the value and the importance of our roots and how that is connected to us through our genealogy records. And be sure to talk to Carol and Tim about her couple of books and her connections to Qingming and Hungry Ghosts and all those things, and China Roots. And she is actually one of the people that was central to me connecting with the speaker that's coming. And so, and then when the speaker comes, his name is Lei, Xing Lei, same as yours, Louis, I think, right?
No, that's different than mine. Don't ask me what it is at the moment.
Anyway, Lei Huan will be coming. He's actually a Chinese, overseas Chinese, was born and raised in Holland, right? Your cousin.
Tingy, your
So
cousin.
My cousin by marriage.
And he went to China to be a consultant business person, and in the process began looking for his own family roots and discovered there's a lot of gaps and different needs to find your roots when you really don't speak the language. And how do you get this thing done? And when we speak the language, we're speaking something funny like toys on toys and all this sort of stuff like that, as opposed to the Mandarin speaking. And we don't know quite exactly what the Chinese pronunciation is, let alone the Chinese characters, let alone the Chinese villages. So I think one of the key questions that was raised in the last two sessions was, at least the first sessions, were things like, how do I find places when I don't even know but where to look or how these characters match or what they were. So what Mr. Lei Weihan did is he also confronted those issues. He's in Beijing and he's very smart, very astute, started a company that tried to digitize all this information, tried to give you a new platform where you can actually, hopefully, my image is that right?
It's great.
And you tick, 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 and you'll be able to find your names, and he'll be able to help you. And the other thing is, he'll be able to help you actually take trips to find your villages and so forth. So he has a company and a firm that's done that, and it's got a couple of branch offices now, right?
Right.
Both in Beijing, Paris,
And Guangzhou.
and Guangzhou, and London, I think. Because I first heard of him when he opened his office in London. So anyway, what I want to do is lead you to the old-fashioned method of just looking at a job. So the job who our family record genealogy, and this is mine. My family's Chinese record is nothing compared to a lot of other people's. Not too long ago on the TV, they did one with Yo-Yo Ma, right? So Yo-Yo Ma found his roots, and he comes up with this 5 binders of things like that. That goes all the way back to, like, I don't know, Confucius or something like that. And it's a real mine. It's just this bunch of little lines and stuff. But at one time I thought it was very impressive, but I don't know. The first part of and it's hard to see, it's a Guangdong Huaxian paint, Pingshan. That's the Guangdong province, Huaxian, the county, and Pingshan is the village where actually my mother came from, not my father. And it's the Gong family record job. first part of the words there are several words here, which is Sun Tung Zui, and that is a part of the Analects, the first 4 characters of Confucian Analects. It says, let there be careful attention to perform the funeral rites to parents, and let them be followed when long gone with the ceremonies of sacrifices, that the virtues of the people will resume its proper excellence. That's the importance of rites and the importance of going back. So originally, a lot of the stuff that I was doing was also something you're probably familiar with. These people, one of the original guys doing this type of research, they're in Southern California, and you can actually buy one of these documents that helps you guide you to find your various things. Probably Mr. Lay would be talking about that too. I think there's some association. There's usually nowadays in Los Angeles and New York, you have these find your genealogy roots type workshops, Las Vegas, and they're usually a couple of days long, right? And you can go through some of this, and a lot of stuff is the basic 101 is with this here. So typical job, I actually was going to bring it here, and in my rush to get things out, to get myself out of the house, I forgot to bring it. So never mind, next time you're gonna. Anyway, mine is not very spectacular compared to Yo-Yo Ma's nice bounded thing. Mine is basically made of newsprint. It's a little bit deteriorated, but it starts off here, and the first person, the first dynasty is in this Shang dynasty area, 2255 BC. 2255 BC. So I can go all the way to the other end of the line, find my father's name, and find a line that traces me all the way back to 2255 BC. So,
can you tell us where you got your job from?
So we'll get to that, and just to go but this structure is very typical of Jabu. I think people have seen Jabus or family records will recognize this very quickly how they do things. You start with in this case with the dynasty, and there's a Shah dynasty, and there's this one. That one doesn't, no one even knows if it really archaeologically exists. But anyway, the first dynasty, the first generation, first generation, this is number 2 generation, 3 generation. And this is the guy, Yuanzhong, right? The first, right? And what he did was then married this person. And there's a little bit of narrative about what happened. If you're a Yo-Yo Ma, you probably have a huge dissertation about what's going on. Our guy's got 2 sentences that says basically the guys were there. One day the country got wiped out, and they went off someplace else. And let's see. So anyway, excuse me. So they hear his thing, his sort of additional surname. Marries a person here, and they have 3 sons. 4 sons. 4 sons, and there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4. So my generation will trace itself through this guy. So that's the line that will eventually find me, right? So all this blank stuff says nothing very special happened. So anyway, he became an official, got it into a village, and somewhere along the way there'll be a statement that says that the country was totally wiped out, and they took down the name of Gong, because that was the district that's where it was. And they talk about it being destroyed during the War in States period. So that would place it that far back, and that would place us in the Shandong area, which would be the north part of China, because it's also the same district nearby where Confucius is supposed to have lived. So anyway, it goes on and on and on to these different things. Again, notice how blank my history is. It's just, so you get through a generation, it goes on and on. Every once in a while, you find something that's a statement. Like I said, one of those I want to go through very quickly because I just pulled this out. I didn't really have a chance to look at it. But there's one that talks about the country being destroyed and we have to move during the disturbances. So now we're in the Zhou. So now we're in the Zhou dynasty. Shang Dynasty barely has archaeological records. Zhou Dynasty was pretty well established. So it goes on and on. But then at a certain point, there's this big break, and there's this narrative that basically talks about the family. Well, it starts off with very standard language. It says, as people have roots, family have sources, water have sources, and roots are there, and all this. It's all the same. You can see it. Almost all the Jiapu starts off with something like that, including Yo-Yo Ma. It's almost the same thing. So we go. So it goes on, and it tells about. Eventually, you're showing that they're in the Jiangxi area, so they're actually closer to the Shanghai Fujian area, above that area. And it tells that at some point they crossed the Lingnan. Lingnan refers to a mountain range that separates the Yangtze watershed with the Pearl River, the Luas River watershed. That means they entered into Guangdong. It's also at the time of the Tang's over the place of exile. So that when officials were really bad, they were sent down south to Lingnan, and where they're supposed to have died of malaria and stuff like that. But at this time, they're escaping more disturbances, and they begin to take on. They begin to take on the characteristics us Cantonese guys, right? So that Lingnan begins to separate linguistic groups, cultural groups, and this sort of stuff. You can actually precisely place the years by some of the dating that they put under this thing. So this guy edited, and this is the guy that gives it to me, Roberta. So in the Ming Dynasty, he's writing, recopying things, and they give you have to know the dates, the reign names, and then there's a book for you guys that are interested in. You can match the reign names to the years. So in this case, in the Ming Dynasty, the year Fa Ming and Yongle on the 14th year. That equates to 1414. So the first editing of this part of the thing was done, or the copying of this was done in 1414. Then later on, another guy took it up, Qing Dynasty in the Da Quan period, the year plus the 9th year, which is 1829. So it's just before, during the beginning of the Taiping Rebellion period. And then the guy that most recently copied it was a person in the Republic period, the 30th year of the Republic, 1949. And the significance of 1949? Communist China. So communist takes over. And what happened was a lot of these Jiapus are kept in our family village temple area. Some of it is written on the walls, and some of it, if you've ever been to, I wish I had a photograph, if you've been to a family temple, village temple, if you guys have seen, they have the names and the plaques. All of it. That actually is the Jiapu on the wall, right? But when you start copying and writing it, you get those different names that come down. So what happened is that in 1949, during the communist, actually what Si Chung said, the guy who wrote this is an old uncle of mine named Si Chung. He was actually a delegate with the Kuomintang government. And so when Kuomintang retreated to Taiwan, he also went with them. And during the time he retreated to Taiwan, he had already started writing or copying the Jiapu off the temple. The reason he was doing that was because a lot of the people were afraid during the Japanese war that when the Japanese came, they would destroy the temples and destroy the records. It turns out that the Japanese didn't do that. In fact, the Japanese were quite respectful of the temples and the old religion because the Japanese probably wanted to be used, or they just respected that issue. But the communists came, and they began to tear down the temples and ultimately resulted in Cultural Revolution. But anyway, he was able to copy this stuff, take it over to Taiwan. A lot of the temples and other things were destroyed. A lot of the gravestones were torn down. And if you go to Guangzhou during the time that we were first stationed there, you can actually go to the public parks, and a lot of the steps that are built around the parks are actually old grave markers that they have torn down and put up to help reinforce public parks. But in 1949, he had this brought over to Taiwan, and when I was assigned there, he was still still living in Taiwan, and he came up to me, knocked on my door, "Hey Ted," or something to that effect. Said, "I know that you're now assigned to the AIT over there, and you know, I thought you might want to have this book," and so he gave it to me. So that was really fun because at that time I was beginning to think I should find my family records. And I started searching, and I think, wow, this is a major work. It's so exciting. This guy knocks on the door. "Hey, here, have this." That was it. But anyway, probably from that period, from that writing of that, is probably factually more correct. The other stuff before that goes back 2255, is probably just legend that you want to attach your family to, right? That's why I think Yo-Yo Ma did. He just attached it to the god of agriculture or wherever he did it. But this is an old map from the 1949 period, just to give you a sense of what it would look like, or not too much different from what we have now. But so we originally showed that we were somewhere up here, got wiped out, took on the name of Gong, and somehow next thing you knew, we were in this Guang, the Jiangxi area here. And then later on, we did the Ming period, and we crossed the Lingnan. When we crossed the Lingnan, that's when we become Cantonese. And so our village, this is Hong Kong over here, and Macau over here, and Guangzhou is right there, and we're about right next to Guangzhou on the north side of Guangzhou. That's Kejia area, Hakka area, where the Taiping Rebellion actually began. So this is from the Lingnan period down, though it starts at 837, that's the Tang Dynasty period. But this is probably fairly, we would say, probably has a little bit more accuracy than stuff that went before that. So we know we're Tang Dynasty, and the first guy in this line is called the first dragon. So I kind of like that, we're the first dragon. And he's married to a guy, a woman named, last name is Liu. And so from the very, maybe from that time on, every time my mother talks to us sons, he says, you have to marry somebody with Liu or Lo. And that's how I think my father did eventually marry somebody. So anyway, this is the line. We went through this 3 sons, and we're going through this guy here. And then again, there's this numbers, like this guy begat this guy, this guy begat this guy, and so forth. Nothing very exciting. A couple of guys get awards, or they win the exam to become part of the bureaucracy. And eventually they come down. Our line is going here, and it shows that we eventually settled in this area. This is the Pingshan area. That's 1980 shot from my great-grandfather's, oh, by the way, eventually it goes on and goes on. And then there's my father, there's my second uncle, third uncle. It doesn't show the aunt. There are no words in it. Sorry, that doesn't happen. So one time I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to list all of us. Right, so I started with 7 of these guys. 4 girls, my goodness, I can't. it's too much trouble. So I said, well, the other purpose for doing this. But it's funny. There is the story that, you remember there was like 3 brothers. Somebody begat and they got 3 sons. Somebody begat and they got 3 sons. And then this guy begat 3 sons. So the legend was, I wonder why my mother had so many girls in the family. So I had 7 kids in the family. So the legend was that our family, my father's family, and they went all the way back to the first dragon, would never have more than 3 sons. They can have another daughter or something, but they would never have more than 3 sons. So my mother gets married to my father. It's first person, my brother Elliot. Second person, my brother Melvin. And third person, me. 3 sons. So she says, this is a cinch, right? So she goes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to break this curse. Right? So, 4th child, my sister Teresa. So, oh, well, yeah, but I'd love to have a sister. That's good. 5th child, my sister Janet. Then the 6th child, my sister Jade. Then the 7th child, my sister Kathy. And so she says, oh, this is a curse. So as a result, we got 7, and that was the end of that. The curse. Oops. So within the job pool, let me see what happened here. Oh, I want to go back here. Russell? Oh, I can't get back.
What's up?
How do I get back to slides? And I got it.
Okay. I'm on somewhere on that list too.
So when we first went back to, and Russell's should be, and Allie, never mind. But anyway, when we went back in the 1980s, Roberta, and you remember the times that we're going to do things. The Cultural Revolution is just over. So you still had those attitudes of these things where you would dig up the graveyards took up a lot of space. At the time when you needed space to grow things and farmland, it was logical in a sort of a sense to just take away the graveyards and make them productive lands, right? So, but over the years, the Cultural Revolution is now over. People are being restored. They're looking to bring back the overseas Chinese like my father and so forth. And one of the things they say is, please come back. The village is okay. We still respect the tradition. And so they point out to my father that we still maintain your ancestors' graves, or at least we allow the relatives, your nephews, or some other people in the village to maintain these graves. So one day we went up there, my father and I, and a bunch of officials took us out to this place, followed us to this place. This really nice hill, and this really nice place where the feng shui is really good. Feng shui, the water and the wind, that allows you to have prosperity flow through your family records, that makes yourself healthy and prosperous. Usually rich people are able to get the best space, right? So I always thought, oh, this is a really nice space. How did it be? And we were like sort of middle to lower class peasants. But we were able to go, and some guy in the village picked us up. We followed him, the officials follow us, and we wind up in this place here. And these are the dirt mounds where at one point you used to have those round circular things, you know, that mark a Chinese grave. These are what they said they'd maintained over the generations during the period of revolution, during the period of cultural revolution, and up to now. So we go over there and we do our annual rites that we've always wanted to do. My father's never been able to do for so many years. And you know, one day as we were walking down the hill, my dad and I were sort of walking in single lines because we're trying to get down the hill. So the officials are separated from us, and I'm with my dad, and I say, "You really think those are our graves?" They just piled some dirt right there. And he says, "I don't think they are our graves, but what the heck? We now have a place to go to." So a few years later, I learned that some cousins put up a little gravestone there. But that is an important thing, just to have some place to go and to remember that line. So that I love my dad. He just said, nah, I don't think so. I've waited 35 years to do this, and now we have a place to go. It does illustrate how important it is. Some of the things in this particular job book, they have other things, and I'm sure that the other books have other records, but it also shows you the number of households that existed from the period which this guy started collecting information. So from the 14th generation up to the 37th generation, which is 1950, we're like the 38th generation from the first dragon. So you see that the population first, when they arrived to this period in 1452, there's 1,450 households, right? And that's in 1813, 1840, 1868, 1895. So what happens here is you begin to have the Taiping Rebellion and the famines and the revolutions and so forth. that's when you have a lot of the disturbances that cause people to drop, so that the period by the time of the 1950s, you have 60 households left in that little village. And when we go back, when we went back there in the 1980s, there's not much there. The village is there. The village where my father and mother, my father lived, and where my mother eventually was brought into the household there. But that means also, that's the reason why we had that move to the United States. And those traditions are now carried over here. This happens to be, again, a recognition of the importance of the rights. As everyone knows, who ever walked the mountain or have burned the incense, you have 3 cups and three bowls in front of this. This happens to be a cemetery area where the district, Huasien, and a couple other districts nearby. And it's done, of course, in Qingming. And this is in Fresno. So from the escaping the Taiping Rebellion in that disorder, we come to Fresno. That's just another angle and look at what that place looks is. But of course, the place is a bit destitute. Even now, all the Chinese Americans have gone to other places, and because it's Fresno and this is so dry, and it looks a little bit desolate this way. I think it feels more lonely when you look at the cemeteries the way they are. But it was a substantial cemetery, looking at the way the original beings were. So lonely, actually, I think. We have just one guy left. But now we come back to Washington, D.C., and the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, CCBA, continues to be these rights. Again, as we started with that comment, rights are so critical. And they have done this every year in Qingming in April. They just finished in April. They go out to 3 different cemeteries where these lost souls, these souls that are buried, cannot return to China. Because after 1938 and 37, the people aren't sent back to China to be cared by the families. So CCBA has taken up that responsibility. Very familiar to anyone who has ever been out. And it goes way, way back. This is 1903 in California. And it's all over the place. This happens to be, there's a couple of cemeteries, and this one representing Toronto, there's a couple of places, Seattle, Vancouver. The yellow portion represents almost forgotten Chinese cemetery. One of my friends, John, is there. This is part of our heritage tour that we did in November. This is in Auburn, California. That's the beginning of the place where the Chinese started joining to build the railroad. That's the starting point. The starting point for railroad for the west side of Sacramento. The Chinese began to join to build the railroad in Auburn, and this was a cemetery there. Now lost. Nobody caring for them anymore. And so this is another cemetery. This one happens to be looking over the Pacific, and this one is in, I think, Vancouver. This one here is a substantial one. This is all gone now. But what I like about this one is this plaque that was originally there. And I don't think you can see it very well, but it's basically saying as if they were here. So the memorial is as if they were here. We want to come back, and now we're back to this place. This is the Congressional Cemetery. So this is the Congressional Cemetery. These are cenotaphs. That's what they're famous for. There aren't any people buried there. They're marking places where senators died during the office. There's a lot of things at the cemetery. The FBI director is buried there. Dolly Madison laid there for a little while. A lot of the old Indian chiefs, Indian chiefs were buried there because they were taken by state President Jackson during the Indian Wars in Florida, and basically held there as almost hostages because they couldn't be returned. And so at one point, before the Native American Museum was built, they had big powwows here because there was a number of significant chiefs, including the son of Cochise, buried not too far from a place where these people are looking. So that's Sue Lee from the Chinese Historical Society, and a friend of ours from the INS, what I used to work with, and one of the caretakers over at the museum, the cemetery. And what we're looking for is a section called Section 99, and it's right against the wall here. It's right, if you know the Congressional Cemetery, it's adjacent to the city jail, and that's the wall. And this lane here is Section 99. This section was where the Chinese were buried. And the Chinese, all the Chinese are here, but there are no bones there. There are no more markers here. Because what happened was that when the Chinese were laid to rest after about 10 years or so, they were being disinterred, and their bones would be accounted for, and they would be shipped back to their home village in China. And that was for the purpose of bringing their bones back to their families so that the rites could be continued by the families. And the CCB had promised to do that when these guys came as sojourners, workers, or laundry people, and they were mostly bachelors who knew that if they died here, they had the assurance that somebody would actually take care of their remains, either shipping them back to China to the families, or would care for them before they are finally sent back for their resting place. And that's the promise of CCBA, and that's why CCBA is still important. But there's nothing here anymore, because this area was dug up, and then the other cemeteries that are around here is what remains. And the reason those are still filled with people that are older, have been buried there long than 1938. 1938 is the crossing point when the war starts coming, and the shipping back to the villages is not as convenient, almost impossible. And then when the Japanese war started, and finally the communists took over of China, and all the bones that were shipped, many of them are still at Hong Kong, where they're waiting to be transshipped back to the villages. That is another topic where we're talking about how these remains were finally returned to a resting area. And some areas are just waiting to be returned to the final resting area. But here, this space here in this Congressional Cemetery is still owned by the Lee Funeral Association. And there aren't, there aren't any new burials over here. But it still is among this Congressional Cemetery that is among people like Dolly Madison, J. Edgar Hoover, John Philip Sousa. They're all in this area. Business people, people from the 1700s, businessmen, their wives, their children, Civil War veterans from both sides of the war were here. It represents the entire history of the United States at this cemetery. And we here in this section, we're part of it, illustrating we're part of it. And what we want to do is remind people that even if you don't see us, we were part of this history, right? And what we did a few years ago, China's American Citizens Alliance and the CCBA decided we're going to mark this space. So we put up a couple of benches, and Frank and Marcy was part of that. And it was a wonderful resting place because they had this beautiful tree, very shady. And a lot of people jog there, and they walk dogs, or they do, but it's really hot in the summertime. And it's really nice to have this really big shade tree right there. So we put a bench there, we wanted it to be understated, and we put up this little plaque, just to remember that Chinese were part of the history of the United States. And that as you rest there today, you can be reminded they also rested there for a brief period before they were returned to China. But the tree fell down, the wall collapsed, and the benches that we had put up also collapsed. And so last year I said, what the heck, I'm going to buy a couple of metal chairs, and they just put it there. So the nice shady spot is now really hot area. So one of the things I like to do is we are trying to work with a DC Humanities Council grant to sort of like do something to refurbish here and make the thing a more complete patio, plant a few trees and so forth. So I would like you guys to keep that in mind when I make the final pitch to say, please donate some money. The other area that I want you to keep in mind is that we're talking about faith and other things that we want to maintain for our DC Chinatown community and what it represents for Chinese in America, is that there is the Guanyin Temple in Chinatown. Many people don't even realize it's right there in the corner, but it's still very active. It's still people still go there. But it is needed repair. And the CCDA people, CCDA basically own and manage it, and they're looking for some money to help repair primarily the front part where the steps are broken out. They want to expand a little bit, create a little bit of air conditioning. And if you walk by there, it's the corner of 6th and H. 6th and H. And there's, because of the way the sidewalk is deteriorated and the yard has deteriorated, it's also a primary place for a lot of homeless people to stay, so it's very difficult to feel comfortable when you walk into that place. If we can refurbish it and make it a little bit nicer, it maintains the temple, and also make it more inviting for people to come. So finally, yes. What happened here? So anyway, finally, our guest speaker is here, and we're going to get him going and get to the last slide. So anyway, I just want to remind you that this week has been such a monumental week for a lot of people. I always want to give recognition for those people that made it possible. All of you did that. But particularly, I want to say Ali Smith is there doing exactly what she does. Of course, my lovely wife, always tolerant of me doing stuff out here. Happy Mother's Day to everyone. And just to remember, this is our poster for the year. Invisible, from invisible to visible, that refers to a lot of things. The fact that our cemetery is there, but we don't know it. Range 99 is there. We need to bring that forth. But yesterday, or the day before yesterday, was the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad. And as everyone knows, that iconic photo that represents the United States and the trains coming together at Promontory in Utah has that photo. Two engines shaking hands, champagne exchange. There's not a Chinese person visible there. And so we want to remind people, as we have been doing for the last several days, that Chinese did take part in the building of this nation, and a very critical part. And you guys continue to be a critical part, whether it's either in the military or as a senior federal officer, or doing the government's good work, or just being a good citizen. So anyway, that's what we have for this week. And there's a ton of other things still happening. So don't rest yet, right? Praise Rich Asians have been sold out from the Library of Congress. But there's also Sue Lee, who is presenting Voices from the Railroad. We want to remember that even though these institutions in the engineering fields are critical for us, we also want to remember all those people, as at the cemetery and other places, who built this, the voices of these people. And so Sue Lee from San Francisco is going to be here doing two presentations, one at the Library of Congress in the evening. I can't remember the date, but that's an evening. The one that I would encourage you to come to is the one at the Department of Labor, and that's going to be on May 20th. That's at noon, and that's going to be in front of the Department of Labor's Hall of Honor, where in 2014 a number of us put together a plaque for the Chinese railroad workers. That's probably the first time in that Chinese workers are actually recognized by the federal government. So I think it has a particularly moving atmosphere to it that's going to happen when Sue comes there as voices to the name that is in the back of the plaque. So keep that in mind. And finally, I want to remind you that October, we're not giving Ali any chance to rest. And the rest of the team that's part of that is we're going to be actively working on our Chinese American Women in History Conference. That'll be October 25, 24, 26. That would be basically at the, that's in partnership with the Chinese American Museum of Washington, D.C. Jenny's in the background. This is Dana Wade. She's our, I want to say a few words, we're partners, right? We're together.
So we're waiting for that.
So anyway, the Chinese American, this fantastic 2.5-day conference is going to focus on Chinese American women and their contributions. So we hope we're not going to focus just on the politicians and those people. We're going to focus on the mothers. And that is a critical part of what we're going to do, whether they're coming as war brides or whether they come as just people who want to continue traditions and make sure those traditions work. And so, October 24th, 26th. Now I want to introduce our real speaker. I first heard about this, my China roots almost 40 years ago. And I sent a message to you. Good to meet you. Yeah, so he's done some great work, and we've got a little bit of explanation, and I think for the sake of time, I'll leave it to you. We're so happy. He is based in Beijing. Went over to Utah where all the events are happening in Trans-Continental Railroad, and he flew over here, braving all the storms, beating all the you know, the planes and things like that that have been missed. So anyway, and he's taking his cousins from Indonesia or from